you had to capture one's life in photographs, how many would you need to take? Or would you rather choose to take one perfect photograph that captures the essence of one's life? This is a story of a CUNY graduate, became a Pulitzer Prize winner, and his lifelong effort to capture historical change, one photograph at a time.
That evening, I was strolled by the Tiananmen Square, and I said to myself, this is a picture I would love to take them studying, some of them with a bicycle. At the distance, there is this Mao's mausoleum. So I decided this depth of field is critical. It was so dark, no indication from the light meter. So I just take a wild guess, close the lens aperture down completely, press the B shutter, and I would count to 23 seconds. 22, 23, I was holding my breath that long, I could no longer do it anymore. I released the shutter. It was the longest exposure of my career. I like that photograph because it, studying for exam has a history in every country. But in China in particular, it's ingrained in every parent's head, in every student's head.
Liu Heung Shing was born in Hong Kong in 1951 to a prominent family from Fuzhou, a city located in southeastern China. It was Liu's mother's desire to give her son what was at the time considered a proper primary education that led the family back to Fuzhou a few years later. Liu soon learned that in Mao's China, being part of a prominent family wasn't necessarily an advantage.
It was the only school report card that there is an item that says political behavior. My family's background kind of preordained how much, what score I would get. I would never get past a C.
But there was an important lesson to be learned from these experiences.
The political message would be drilled into everyone, from the school kids to the adult, into their consciousness of what is politically right, what is politically wrong.
On top of that, this political and moral certainty came in a very unique visual form.
These posters, these murals, it becomes part and parcel with every mainlander's Chinese daily lives.
It was Mao's infamous Great Leap Forward campaign that pushed Liu's family out of mainland China and back to Hong Kong, where his father started working as a newspaper editor in charge of international news reporting.
Suddenly, I started learning English. My father would say, well, here's the story of Reuters and AP. You can translate. So that's already in the 60s, my exposures to headlines and news content.
Surprisingly, his desire to pursue a formal education in the field of journalism wasn't met with enthusiasm.
Oh, no. Don't do that. Journalism cannot be taught.
Liu's second choice, political science, led him to apply to universities outside of China, and it was in 1969 that he learned he was accepted to Hunter College.
Two things happened to me at Hunter. One was his elective course with Gjon Mili.
Known for his pioneering use of lights and long exposure photography, Gjon Mili was one of the first people who managed to capture movement in a single frame, a technique so masterfully expressed in his photographs of famous artists such as Pablo Picasso and Henri Matisse.
In the history of photography, to photograph an artist within one exposure from a portrait of him to what he could do, that was sensational. He said, well, in photography, you have ASA, the film speed, and you have the shutter speed. These three things together make photography unique.
After seeing some of his classwork, Mili invited Liu to become his assistant at Life magazine.
And Gjon Mili would have a lot of newspaper and magazine clipping. His wall is full of this. At that point, he might have already planted this idea of what makes a good photograph. He said you could read it instead of look at it. If you have long sequences of photographs, you can read a much bigger story. Through long-form photojournalism, you can actually tell something that a single image was unable to tell.
In 1976, Liu was sent to his first official assignment in China, the great helmsman's funeral at Tiananmen Square. His trip to Beijing, however, got delayed and he never reached his destination.
That would turn out to be the blessing. I was wandering around on the banks of the Pearl River Delta. That's why I could photograph these people doing Tai Chi, but wearing that black armband. And I realized there was no mourning in their face. They looked chill. And that's what I realized, my childhood images come back. They used to be much more uptight than this. So is China about to change?
For the next 10 years, working as a photographer for major houses such as Time magazine and Associated Press, Liu, now commonly known as HS, would document this change one photograph at a time.
When you look at these photographs, that people adapting to changes, if these changes further translate into a larger trend, what would these changes imply? And then I heard the news, the Chinese students were on hunger strike.
The 3,000 student hunger strikers remain at the core of the protest.
In 1989, while covering protests in Seoul, South Korea, HS was called back to Beijing. Something big was brewing at Tiananmen Square.
Initially, it was all very harmless. All these organizations would have their staff go out and banners and protests and so on and so forth. And then in the middle of the night, the students of the Central Fine Arts Academy will be rolling out this styrofoam statue. I said China would not let an American symbol, goddess of democracy, in China's most public square, the world's largest square, facing down Mao, for too long.
Tasked with wiring photos to AP's headquarters in New York, HS was instrumental in smuggling out the famous Tank Man photo out of China. Yet, Tank Man was not the only photograph that was wired out of Beijing.
HS, the tanks are on the way to you. I got to the rooftop and I look at it, the top of the tank with two PLA soldiers with a helmet. And underneath that bridge, there was this young lovers on a bicycle. And I make a frame, again rush back to the bureau. I put the frame into the transmitter and I send. And the next day, president of the Associated Press sent us an old-fashioned cable. Today, the AP owns the world.
But it was HS's work at the AP bureau in Moscow that eventually won him a Pulitzer Prize, and one very particular photograph that he took on December 25th, 1991.
And then I pick up the phone and then say, hey, Tom Johnson here. What are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, not every day. Chairman of CNN will call me and ask me if I would be free the next day. So I showed up and I went up to this very ornate room. And then I learned that Gorbachev was going to go live, to resign through live broadcast. And I look around, there was not a single photographer. Soviet, TASS, none. Except me. As I sat down, I said, oh my God, this is the place, the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviet Union, all of these things going to end in front of me. Maybe I have a way to capture the speech in the air, still moving, while this event is still happening towards the end. But the history hasn't ended. And then again, the shutter, Gjon Mili telling us about the shutter. The voice of Gorbachev was tailing off. So I pick up my camera and then click. I get out and the flag of the Soviet Union was coming down and Russian Federation flag was going up. And when I saw Gorbachev was shot on the negative and I saw the paper was blurry, it was a moment in one's life.
Liu Heung Shing and his team at the Associated Press won the Pulitzer Prize in Spot News Photography in 1992. Yet HS's work is far from over.
And today, I wanted to see what China's 2.0 or China 3.0 look like. from the days when people were clothed in this drab Maoist blue-green jacket to today to be the leading trading partner of 140 countries. So I thought maybe again my camera could capture the layers of complexity like looking at an onion to peel it back layer by layer.